My greedy aunt stole my college fund and used it for a lavish vacation. When I confronted her, she laughed, "You can just get a loan, stop being selfish." That night, I sent a letter to her husband. The next morning, she screamed, "You just destroyed my life." I, 18 male, was raised by a single mom. My dad left when I was a baby, and my mom did everything she could to give me a good life. We weren't rich, far from it, but she made sure I had everything I needed. One thing she was adamant about was my education. She worked multiple jobs, lived below her means, and saved whatever she could to make sure I had a future. She set up a college fund in my name and put money into it for years. She used to tell me, "No matter what happens, this money is for your future." I never thought anything would happen to it. But I was wrong. Just after my 17th birthday, my mom passed away suddenly. A heart attack. No warning. No goodbyes. One day she was here, and the next she was gone. My world fell apart. I was still in high school, and since I wasn't 18 yet, my college fund was put under the care of my aunt, Rachel, my mom's only sibling. She was supposed to hold on to it for me until I turned 18. I didn't think twice about it. I had no reason not to trust her. That was my second mistake. A few months after my mom died, I started preparing for college. I had already been accepted to the University of Illinois, and while my grades were good, I didn't get a full scholarship. But that was okay. I had $45,000 in my college fund, enough to cover a huge chunk of tuition. I turned 18, and the first thing I did was go to the bank to withdraw what I needed for my first semester. I filled out the paperwork, showed my ID, and waited. The bank teller frowned at the screen. "I'm sorry," she said. "There's nothing in this account." I felt like I had been punched in the stomach. "There must be a mistake," I said. She checked again. The account was completely empty. I went straight to my aunt's house, my hands shaking the entire drive. Rachel opened the door with a smug expression, like she knew why I was there. Before I could even ask, she said, "Oh, don't look so dramatic." I asked where my money was. She shrugged. "I used it." I could barely breathe. "What do you mean you used it?" She rolled her eyes. "I took a trip." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "You stole my college fund to go on a vacation." "Europe," she said, grinning like it was funny. "Paris, Rome, Santorini. It was beautiful." I was speechless. She took everything. The money my mom spent years saving. The money she sacrificed for. The money that was meant to give me a future. And Rachel had spent it on a month-long luxury vacation. I was shaking. "You had no right." "Oh, stop," she interrupted, laughing. "It's not like you can't go to college. Just take out a loan like everyone else." "A loan? You're telling me to take out a loan because you stole the money my mom saved for me?" Rachel waved a hand. "You're overreacting. This is why I didn't tell you. I knew you'd be selfish about it." I thought I misheard her. "Selfish? You stole from me, and I'm selfish?" "It's just money," she said with a sigh. "You'll make more." I, on the other hand, needed a break. Do you know how exhausting life is? Bills, marriage, stress. This was my first vacation in years. My stomach turned. "Mom trusted you," I said. My voice shook, but I didn't care. "She put you in charge because she thought you would do the right thing." Rachel just smiled. "Well, she's dead," she said. "So let's not act like this was a huge deal. It's done. Move on." I don't know how I didn't punch her right then and there. I turned and walked out without another word. I could still hear her laughing behind me. Rachel thought she got away with it. She thought she could steal from me, from my mom, and face no consequences. She was wrong. Because Rachel had a secret. One she didn't know I knew. Her marriage was not as perfect as she pretended. Her husband, Mark, was a quiet, hard-working guy. I always liked him, and I knew one thing for sure: he hated how Rachel handled money. I overheard him talking to my mom once. He was worried about her spending habits. He thought she was wasting money and lying about expenses. Back then, he didn't have proof. But I did. That night, I drafted a letter. "Dear Mark, you don't know me, but you should know where your wife's luxury European vacation money really came from. She emptied her deceased sister's college fund for her orphan nephew to pay for it. If you don't believe me, check the withdrawals on this account number. Sincerely, someone who thinks you deserve the truth. I mailed it the next morning. Less than 24 hours later, shit hit the fan. I got a text from my cousin, Rachel's daughter. "WTF did you do? Mom is screaming and crying, and Dad just threw all her designer bags out on the front lawn." I smiled. Mark wasn't an idiot. He checked the bank statements. And he saw everything. That's when things really started falling apart. Rachel was always good at getting her way. She knew how to manipulate people, how to lie with a straight face, and how to never take responsibility for anything. But this time, she had messed with the wrong person. By the time she realized what I had done, it was too late. Mark knew everything. And for the first time in her life, Rachel had no way out. I got a call from my cousin later that night. I could barely make out what she was saying over the sound of screaming in the background. "Dad's losing his mind," she whispered. "I've never seen him this mad." He threw her phone out the window. "She's freaking out." "Good." I didn't say anything, just waited. Then she added, "He's talking about freezing the accounts." She's panicking. Rachel had always relied on Mark's money. Sure, she had a part-time job at some boutique, but it barely covered gas and Starbucks. She needed his money. And now, he was cutting her off. I thought I was done with Rachel. I figured she'd be too busy trying to save her marriage to bother with me. But I was wrong. The next evening, she showed up at my apartment. I barely had time to process it before she shoved her way inside. Her makeup was smeared, her hair was a mess, and her hands were shaking. I had never seen her like this. "You ruined my life," she screamed, slamming the door behind her. I crossed my arms. "You stole my money." Her lip curled. "You entitled little brat. Do you have any idea what you've done? Mark wants a divorce. He locked me out of our accounts. I have nothing." I didn't say anything. I just watched as she fell apart. Her breathing was ragged, her hands pulling at her hair like she was on the edge of a breakdown. Then she dropped to her knees. I made a mistake," she whispered. Her voice cracked. "I messed up. But you went too far." I scoffed. "I went too far. You stole my future and laughed in my face. You told me to take out a loan while you drank champagne in Paris." She winced but kept going. I'll pay you back. I swear. Just call Mark. Tell him I didn't mean it." I stared at her. "You didn't mean to steal 45 grand. I just needed a break. A reset. A fresh start." She looked up at me, eyes desperate. "Help me." For a second, just a second, I almost felt bad. Then I remembered my mom working double shifts. I remembered her skipping meals so she could put more money into that fund. I remembered Rachel's smug face when she told me to stop being selfish. I took a deep breath. Then I stepped back. "Get out." She didn't move. So I opened the door. "Get out." Rachel's face twisted, and for a second, the desperation snapped into rage. "You're just like your mother," she spat. "Always playing the victim. Always thinking the world owes you something." I didn't say a word. I just stood there, staring at her, until she finally got up and stormed out. She didn't even bother closing the door behind her. I thought that was the end of it. I thought she'd slink away, lick her wounds, and figure out a way to survive without Mark's money. I should have known better. Rachel wasn't the type to go down without a fight. And she wasn't done with me yet. 3 days later, I got a call. Not from Rachel. Not from Mark. But from a lawyer. Apparently, Rachel was suing me. Suing me. For emotional distress. At first, I thought it was a joke. But no. She had actually filed a lawsuit against me, claiming that I had deliberately sabotaged her marriage and caused her significant financial and emotional hardship. It was absurd. But it was also terrifying. I barely had enough money for rent, let alone a lawyer. I was just a kid trying to survive. And now, Rachel was trying to drag me into court. I wanted to believe no judge would take it seriously. But then I learned something else. Rachel had hired a lawyer using the last of her savings. And her plan? To bleed me dry. If I couldn't afford to fight back, she could push for a settlement. She wasn't trying to win. She was trying to break me. And for the first time, I started to wonder, had I underestimated her? At first, I thought Rachel's lawsuit was a joke. I mean, how could she sue me for emotional distress when she was the one who stole my college fund? But after the initial shock wore off, reality hit me like a truck. This wasn't just a petty threat. This was real. She had filed actual paperwork. I got a letter from her lawyer demanding $50,000 in damages for mental and financial hardship caused by my defamation and deliberate interference in her marriage. I wanted to laugh. I wanted to scream. But most of all, I wanted to know how the hell she thought this would work. Because Rachel was broke. Dead broke. Mark had locked her out of their joint accounts. She had no access to his money, no income of her own, and now she was spending what little she had left on a lawyer. She was gambling on me not having the money to fight back. And the worst part? She wasn't entirely wrong. I barely had anything to my name. I was living off a small inheritance from my mom, just enough to cover rent, food, and some emergency savings. I didn't have thousands to throw at a lawyer. Rachel thought she could drag me down with her. She thought I would panic and agree to settle just to avoid a legal battle. But Rachel forgot one thing. I was my mother's son. And I don't back down. I knew I couldn't fight this alone, so I reached out to the only person who hated Rachel almost as much as I did. Mark. When I called him, I didn't even have to explain. He already knew. "She's suing you, isn't she?" he said bitterly. I exhaled. Yep. Mark was silent for a moment. Then he let out a humorless laugh. "She's out of her damn mind." Agreed. "Don't worry," he said. "I'll handle it." And oh boy, did he handle it. Because while Rachel had wasted all her money on a mediocre lawyer from a strip mall, Mark had connections. He had been working in finance for years. He knew people. And one of those people was a ruthless divorce attorney. Not only did he have decades of experience, but he had also been looking for any excuse to go after Rachel. And now? Now he had one. While Rachel was focused on suing me, she didn't realize something. By going after me, she had given Mark more ammo in the divorce. A judge wasn't just going to see a bitter ex-wife. Now, there was documented proof that she was financially reckless and willing to waste money on pointless legal battles. And that? That was leverage. I don't know exactly what Mark's lawyer said to Rachel's lawyer, but within a week, I got a call. Rachel was dropping the lawsuit. Just like that. I didn't even have to go to court. She folded. But it didn't end there. Because while she had crawled back into her hole, Mark wasn't done. And what he did next changed everything. A few days after the lawsuit was dropped, Mark invited me out for coffee. I had barely sat down before he slid a folder across the table. "Read it," he said. I opened it. And my entire world tilted. Because inside was a copy of my mother's will. And in that will, she had left everything to me. Not just my college fund. Everything. Her house. Her investments. Her life insurance payout. Everything. And the number at the bottom of the page? It wasn't $45,000. It was over $300,000. My heart started pounding. I don't understand. Mark took a slow sip of his coffee. "Rachel lied to you." "What?" "She didn't just steal your college fund," he said. "She stole everything your mom left you." My hand started shaking. This has to be a mistake," I stammered. I thought Mom didn't have much. I thought, that's what she wanted you to think." Mark leaned forward. "When your mom died, Rachel was in charge of handling the estate until you turned 18. My stomach twisted. She was supposed to transfer everything to you when you came of age. She didn't. Instead, she sold the house. Cashed out all the investments. Kept everything. And lied to me. She made me believe my mother had barely left me anything. But in reality, Rachel had stolen over $300,000. And that was why she had panicked when I went after her. Because she hadn't just stolen from me. She had committed fraud. I felt sick. I had spent months believing my future was gone. I had been ready to take out loans, to struggle through school, all because Rachel told me there was nothing left. And the whole time, she had been living off my money. Buying designer bags. Going on vacations. Living in a house that had originally belonged to my mother. I clenched my fists. I want it back. Mark's eyes gleamed. I thought you might say that. And then he slid me a second folder. Inside. A lawsuit. Against Rachel. For fraud. For embezzlement. For theft. Mark had been waiting for this moment. And now. It was my turn to destroy her. Mark had been waiting for this moment. I had spent months thinking my future was gone. That my mom had barely left me anything. That I was destined to struggle because my aunt stole everything. But now, I knew the truth. Rachel had taken over $300,000 from me. And I was going to take it back. Mark's lawyer helped me file the lawsuit immediately. It wasn't just for theft. It was for fraud, embezzlement, and misappropriation of funds. Rachel was in serious trouble. And when she found out, she lost it. I was at home when she showed up again. This time, she didn't knock. She pounded on my door like she was trying to break it down. When I opened it, she shoved legal papers in my face. "What the hell is this?" she screeched. I didn't flinch. "You know exactly what it is." Her hands were shaking as she flipped through the pages. "You're suing me? For the money you stole?" "Yeah. You can't do this." Her voice cracked. I don't even have the money anymore. It's gone." I shrugged. "Not my problem." She let out a bitter laugh, one that didn't quite cover the sheer panic in her eyes. "You think you're gonna win? You think you can just take me down?" She scoffed. "Good luck. You don't have proof." I tilted my head. "Mark does." Her face drained of color. "He got copies of Mom's will, the bank statements, the house sale records," I continued. "He knows everything. And now. So does the court." Rachel's lips trembled. Her whole body was shaking. Then, in a last, pathetic attempt to save herself, she dropped the papers and fell to her knees. I didn't mean to steal from you," she whispered. I crossed my arms. "You emptied my college fund for a vacation." She wiped at her eyes. "I wasn't thinking. I was struggling, and I just thought." "You thought what?" I snapped. "That you deserved it more than I did. That my future didn't matter." Tears streamed down her face, but I didn't feel 1 ounce of sympathy. "You don't understand," she whispered. "I'm going to lose everything." I stared at her. "That's not my problem." She collapsed into sobs. But I didn't care. For months, she had lived off the money my mother worked for. She had spent it on herself, acting like it was her reward for enduring a hard life. But now she was finally paying for it. Rachel tried everything to stop the lawsuit. She called everyone in the family, playing the victim, claiming I was being cruel. But nobody bought it. Because once the lawsuit became public, everyone saw who she really was. Mark made sure of it. He told her parents. Her friends. Her church group. Every single person Rachel had ever tried to impress found out what she did. And in one night, she lost every shred of respect she had left. Rachel had no defense. The evidence was overwhelming. The bank statements, the withdrawals, the house sale, all of it pointed back to her. The judge ruled in my favor almost immediately. Rachel was ordered to pay everything back. All $300,000. Money she didn't have. She had no savings. No investments. Nothing left. And because of the fraud charges, she couldn't even file for bankruptcy to escape it. She would have to pay me back for the rest of her life. The last time I saw her, she was a wreck. Disheveled. Defeated. She wouldn't even look at me as she signed over her car, her jewelry, and what little she had left to start paying off her debt. I thought I would feel satisfaction. But when I looked at her, I just felt nothing. She wasn't my family anymore. She was just a thief who got caught. The money wasn't the victory. The real victory was that she couldn't hurt me anymore. She had spent so much of her life using people, manipulating them, stealing from them. But this time, she lost. And I got my future back.